Hello, first-time coders. So today's lab is going to be about functions. Precisely, how can we give functions input and how do we receive output from these functions? So functions are like this black box that you have. Black box is something you don't care what is inside it. So all that we want is to give it some kind of input, and then in the end it gives us an output that we desire. We don't care what it does here. It can do whatever it wants, but in the end there is a target output or a desired output that we want. So this is what we call a function. Okay, so in this lab we want to see how do we take an input, give it to a function, process that input and get an output. So let's say we have a function, let's say we have a vehicle. This is a Lamborghini, right? So we have this Lamborghini. So if we know the initial velocity and we know the final velocity and we know the acceleration of the car, we want to know how far it can go, distance s. So based on this, we know that we have v square is equals to u square minus plus 2as. But from this, we are interested in the speed, so we make the speed subject of the formula. So we'll have s is equal to this goes back there, so we have v square minus u square all over 2a. So this is the equation we want to solve for. So what the tip is that whatever you have in the right hand of your equation are your inputs. These are the things we need from the user, and after we finish our processing, which is applying this formula, we should give him this output. So let's write the program using without any functions first. So we can just ask the user to give us u equal to float, and then we ask the user using prompt to input initial velocity. Okay, so we get the initial velocity from the user, and then we can say v equal to input, enter the final velocity. So remember, if you use input only, the result will be a string. So we need to convert that string into a float or integer. But in this case, since velocity is a continuous quantity, we should use float. And then we have the acceleration. And then we say input, enter the car's acceleration. Okay, so we have the inputs. Now we can just calculate speed is equal to v square minus u square all over 2a, right? But there is, let's see what's our formula here. Yeah, so we have the right thing, all over 2a, but the problem with this is I have to put multiplication here. Now the problem with this is the computer will divide u square with 2. To make sure it does the subtraction first, we put the subtraction in a bracket. Now we will divide everything here but multiply it by 2. So to make sure that we do the multiplication before the division, let's put these 2 in bracket. Okay, so then we can print then inside we can say, okay, distance equal to, and then we can print s. So if we run this, it will ask us for initial velocity, let's say 0.5, final velocity, let's say 2.25, let's say acceleration is 0. So acceleration is let's say 10.45. So let's see, the final distance covered is this. Okay, so we can correct this by just putting, we want we want float here, so we change this comma to a percent sign, right? We want 2 decimal places, so we'll say after our decimal place, approximate to 2 decimal places. Okay, so now this is our main function. Always remember to put your other functions before the main. Okay, so anything that is not inside a definition, the computer will run it before your function. So it only runs your functions when it sees the function being called outside, like in this place. So for example, now we can create a function using the define keyword, and then we call that function distance. Okay, so distance will collect inputs. So we said, if you remember, we said the ones we tick in green are the inputs. So we will give it U, V, and A. So I can just give them in a different notation. I can say I can say X, Y, and Z. So the reason why I give them different notation is to tell you that you don't necessarily have to use the same variables. But now we can do the calculation inside this function. So we can carry this and we can put it inside our function. So if you remember, this is where we want to do our calculation, right? So let's put a comment here. Required here. All right, so okay, now what else do we need? We want our function to do this calculation and store the distance in a variable dist. When it finishes, we want it to send back the result to the person who called it. So we can say return. Return means irja in Arabic. Dist. Okay, so this will return this value inside the variable. Okay, so if you, now we know that this our function will collect inputs from the user. He will get X, Y, and Z from the user, and then it will use them. All right, so now let's come back here. Let's change this with distance, our function. So our function, we need to give it inputs. Remember, we have U, V, and A. So if we put U, V, and A, so the value inside U will enter X, the value inside V will enter Y, and the value inside A will enter Z. So now we know that for every value of U we see, we should change it with X. And for every value of V, we should change it with Y, because inside this function, it will be Y. For every value of A, we should change it with Z, so that every value, because u, v, and a, their values will enter x, y, and z. So we will use these values instead. Okay, so if we do our calculation, then the value will enter distance, and then distance will bring back the solution, and then that solution will enter into the function. Okay, so now we can print this. So if we run this, now if we run this, what happens? First, our code starts with define, but it will not enter the define because the function is not called. It will just note that, oh, I have this function, and then it passes on. And then when it reaches 5, it will ask me to input initial velocity. So let's say we have 0.5, and then our final velocity after acceleration, let's say 200.45, and then our acceleration is, let's say, 60 meters per second, for example. So now we are in line 7. Once we press enter, when the computer comes here, it will see s is equal to, but it will see distance. It will remember, oh, I have seen distance before. Then it goes back to line 1. It will see distance. So it will take the value of u. It will put it inside here. So it will put 0.5 inside x. It will put 200.45 inside y. And it will put this 60 inside z. And then it does the calculation. It saves the answer inside distance. It returns the value. So the value will now come here, and then it will enter s. So if we print s, we will get the answer. Okay, so this is how functions work. Now, supposing we want to return more than one value, how do we do that? What I'm saying is that, what if our function takes, in this example, what we did is we see a function that takes 3 inputs, u, v, and a, which it sees them inside it as x, y, and z, and then it calculates distance, which it then send it outside, and we collect it as s. Now, what if I have more than one value that I want to send? We'll see this in the next video. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.